Hello and welcome again to Awaken and Ascend. I am Jennifer Regular, your host, also known as the Soul Illuminator at Lighting the Path. And today I have Lei, who's here as part of her mission to heal all trauma, past and present, so humanity can fully evolve in consciousness. Lei Mohr started this life in Hawaii. She has a Master's of Arts and lived in Russia with her two sons. She moved back to Hawaii, where she volunteered through the 2018 Kilauea eruption. She guides people through their changing trauma to their dream life. She has experienced 3 transformational near-death experiences and 1 shared death experience. Welcome, Lei. It is so wonderful to have you here. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate being here, and I am happy to be here.
That is so wonderful to hear. And I'm curious, what lit your path to becoming one who guides people to live their dream life in this way?
Well, I didn't start out thinking that this is the way it would be. It took me many, many years to figure out that I am what they call a transformer, which means I come here and my whole purpose in being in this life is to transform, in this case, traumas, family trauma, family history trauma, ancestral trauma. Those are the kinds of things that if you want to be somebody who's effective at doing it, you must know personally what it feels like, which means the early part of my life was not what most people would call easy. I started in a family where my parents got together when they were still teenagers, and my mother had her first child at 16. She proceeded to have 6 kids in 7.5 years. And so to say that she was overwhelmed, frustrated, angry is probably an understatement. And most of us, in fact, all of us felt it in varying degrees, but most of us felt it pretty strongly. I remember when I was 3 years old, I hid behind the furniture to be silent, to be completely invisible so that I could remain safe. But I also had this ability, and I still have it. I can read a person's energy, their emotional energy instantly. So I could know when she was going to be in a really bad mood and when I needed to hide. I can still do that today with people, and that's a lot of how I can talk to people. But it's also, it doesn't have to be physical. I don't have to be right in front of them. I can read someone through technology. I can read someone who is just talking to me from a distance. And so that's kind of how it started. I didn't realize I was doing anything strange. When I was 5 years old, I was walking down the road on the sidewalk with some unnamed person, probably female, and we were apparently having our pictures taken or something. And as we were walking down the sidewalk, coming at us the other way was a lady in a yellow dress. And I just knew completely, without a doubt, that that lady did not like my yellow dress. Why I remember that? Well, maybe that's because it was necessary for the story to understand that I knew things that I shouldn't necessarily know. How would I know? There was no interaction with this lady, but I knew. And so that was another ability that I had. But I also came from a very, very strong Catholic background where if you had any such ability, you were evil and you were going to go to hell. And if you practiced having such an ability, oh man, I mean, you were excommunicated from everyone. And I thought, as a child, if my home life, which everyone told me was idyllic and perfect, and that this hell place was worse than that, then I wanted nothing about going there. So I hid myself for decades. I was not going to show anything, even though little things kept popping up throughout my life that said, you're different. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm not going there. I'm not going there. And so when the first near-death experience happened, I was 21. I was having my second child, and the pregnancy had been okay, but he was very active. And when in the process of having him, he kept, as I was in labor, he kept turning flips in my stomach. And in order to try and keep him from wrapping the cord around his neck or his body or something else, and trying to get him to not be a breech baby, they had to physically reach up inside of me and turn him around. This is, I don't advise anybody ever try and do this. It was beyond painful. And I don't blame what happened after that on any of the staff that were there. They were doing the very best they could under extremely difficult circumstances, and it did not lend itself to nice, easy decisions, well laid out decisions. They were like, act, act, act. So after he was born, and he did make it into this world with no cords wrapped around his neck, and he was fine. A couple days later, I came down with a very high fever and an internal infection. And so I was taken to the hospital, and I remember reading the thermometer, and it said my temperature was 111 degrees. And now I know most people will say that's not possible. You couldn't live through that. To which I say, and I didn't. So I'm laying there in the hospital on the bed, and not suddenly, I'm just laying there. 111, I'm not moving much. In fact, I'm not moving at all. And then I suddenly sat up. And then I looked back, and back there is my body on the bed. There's no emotion, no feeling in this at all, just, And then I floated out of my body and into a very dark tunnel. This is pitch black. There is nothing around. You can see absolutely nothing. And I'm floating through there. And it is the most blissful feeling I have ever felt. It was so unconditionally loving. The words don't describe it, but I'm going to try. So unconditionally loving, so completely accepting, non-judgmental, so just beautiful, just blissful. And so I'm happy to be kind of floating through it. I don't care. And then I come to something that feels like a widening or a room or something. I can't see anything, so I can't tell what it is, but it felt wider. And I'm like, this is interesting, but it still feels the same. And I'm like, oh, I'm all good with it. Okay. And then I hear this voice, which I perceived as male, but there's no genders or anything in this realm, but I perceived it as male, and I perceived it as the most kind, gentle, loving male voice. And he asked, do you want to come now? And I recognized instantly I was making a choice. And I thought about my two kids back there, and I'm like, I can't. I have to raise those two children. And he kind of, I perceived a nod of a head, although there was nothing there, just acceptance. Okay. And I went right back down the tunnel very quickly, plopped into my body, and the fever broke. And I was out of the hospital the next day. But what I realized is how empowered I was, because I had made the choice to be here. I knew I had a purpose in being here. And I knew that my life had meaning here in this realm. And I believe everybody should have that. They should know they are here for a purpose, that they are here not by accident, that there is a reason for them to be here. and that they have things to do while they're here. They have a purpose. And so that's kind of how I got into it. But then again, I'm still coming from this background, and I hid it for decades. I didn't even talk to a single person about it because I knew they'd think I was weird. They'd think I was crazy. And they would probably want to just run away from me as fast as they could. So I didn't tell anybody. However, it did change my life. That particular marriage, because he could no longer control me, he tried to control me physically, and it didn't work. And I took the boys and said goodbye. And that apparently is very common in near-death experiences. It's something, it's life-changing.
Yeah.
It really affects how you are, who you are, and your perception of why you're here. So that's kind of how it all started. Does that answer your question?
That answers my question. And what an incredible experience, and literally lit your path, right? As you're going through that. And what it sounds like is there was no fear.
There was no fear.
Yeah.
Absolutely no fear. And the thing about, if you've been to the other side and you know there's no death, then you also know there's no fear here in this life. So you're not afraid of death, but you're also not afraid of life. And you're more willing to make the choices, to have the experiences, because you're not looking at it through the lens of fear.
What would you say you were looking at as through what lens were you looking at it through?
I looked at it more like, how is this going to affect me? How is it going to affect the boys? Is it what we need to do? Is it what I need to do?
Mm.
And in the case of the marriage, it was not. It was very obvious that was not to be where I was supposed to be. And I sure wasn't going to have my two children in that environment.
And pure acceptance, it sounds like, too, of knowing your purpose, that you are here for a reason. And despite having to hide certain abilities that you had, gifts that you have, having to hold that back just for that sense of safety and continued connection, you knew at some point, I imagine, that it was time to share. And I'd love to hear about that. I also want to acknowledge what you said at the beginning of that too, is that to become a healer, there's many rites of passage or initiations or healing that we need to do on our own as well, that we go through so that we can develop that ability to help others on their healing journey and to experience trauma to really understand, even though you had the ability to experience what others were experiencing, know their thoughts, and have that empathic ability, have that knowingness, there's still the experience that also gives it more intensity, more value, more significance for another person to understand that you understand. If that makes sense.
Yes,
Yeah.
it actually attracts people to me, to the people who are in whatever their life-changing trauma might be. It might be the loss of a spouse, especially a husband, and like a very sudden loss of a husband, or it might be somebody who knows that wherever they are, maybe they have a job and it pays the bills, but it is not what they really want to do.
Mhm.
How do they move from where they are to where they need to be? And that, whether people realize it or not, is a life-changing trauma.
Yeah.
Because if you're in a job where you are very unhappy, or if you're just in a job and it pays the bills, but it's not something that's fulfilling,
Mhm.
that's trauma.
Mhm.
And so I have been helping people with those kinds of traumas for a very long time. Since the first near-death experience, people would just sort of come and start talking to me, and I didn't understand it at the time. but okay. It wasn't until much later that I started thinking, maybe this is actually what I'm supposed to be doing.
Mm.
And it was actually decades later before I actually got to that. And the thing that made it most, that completed my story, I wouldn't have been able to write the book until my story was complete. And that is to go back to my beginnings, to where I was with my mother, who was, I'm going to just put the word out there, she was quite abusive. In fact, she almost killed me at one point in time, and each of my siblings in turn at some point in time during our lives. So it was rough. And that's a lot of trauma to throw out at kids and to have them live with. Oh, there came a point after all of these other near-death experiences that were the lead up to this, where I knew I needed to heal that. I needed to get past that because it was very obvious that trauma was holding me back from being who I needed to be.
Mm.
I'm like, I have no idea how to do this. How do I work with this? And I have another acquaintance that she had mentioned that she had a similar background, and that she had somehow learned to see her parents as loving her. And I'm like, how do you do that? And so I asked, to no one, to everything, to whatever, to the universe, how do I heal this? And they gave me a picture. They put me in what looked like a theater with a stage, and it's all dark, and I'm the only one in the seats. And I'm like, okay. And then they showed me that not only am I the person in the seats, I am the director, I am the actor, I am the one who's doing all of the lights and sound. I'm everything, every part of this. And then I watched as they were putting my life on the stage, and I am in all these different places at the same time. And I could easily then see my mother as one of the actors in my play, movie, whatever you want to call it. And I could see how she had chosen to play that part so that I could have the foundation I needed to be the transformer that I am now.
Yes.
She loved me enough to come into this life and do all those horrible things because she wanted me to be able to help not only myself, but she wanted me to be able to help others.
Mm.
And that's empowering. And then just months after that, just as an aside to let you know just how serious this is, the last 15 years of my mother's life she spent in prison for murdering my sister-in-law. So there's really a lot of trauma there that I'm healing.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously nobody had seen her for the last 15 years. And we didn't hear anything. The only contact they had was my brother, who had been married to the sister-in-law, who was not involved with the crime at all. But because he was associated, that he was the only contact the prison had. So I just, a couple months after I got the healing done, and I was feeling so free and relieved and joyful and loving and loved. And I thought, this is wonderful. And then all of a sudden, I got this really anxious, nervous, jittery, just completely like everything was going haywire in my body, feeling and just and for no apparent reason. And I'm like, what's going on here? And it just continued. I tried everything. I tried yoga, meditation, relaxing baths, teas. I tried absolutely everything. Nothing touched it. Nothing. And I'm like, Okay, it may not be mine, but I have no idea what's going on here. And then, and I know this sounds really trite, but this is the absolute truth. On the third day, it suddenly changed. And it went from being all of that to being joy, bliss, love, just complete. I was flying, and I had no idea what was going on. And then my brother calls me and he said, I have to tell you, our mother just passed. And I told him what I had been through in the last couple days. And he said, they called me a couple days ago and said she was not in good shape and they didn't expect her to live. I knew then that I had shared what she was going through as she passed. And although that's not the most dramatic of passings, I mean, there's other stories of other people who've had shared experiences that are much more detailed in their accounts than that. But it was a shared death experience. And it was very freeing to know that she was now in a place of love where she could feel what she was not able to have here, and that we could then have the relationship that we were not allowed or not able to have here.
Yes. Mm.
And that's when my story became complete. And it was shortly thereafter they woke me up at 3 a.m. and said, "You're going to write a book." And I said, "What?" Now? And they made me get up, and they not only told me all about the book, they wrote the outline for me. And they said, you don't have to actually do the writing yourself. We're going to be here. We're going to make sure you put everything on there that needs to be in there. And we're going to give you what you need to write this book. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so the book has my name on it. But, and the book is called Because in Each and Every One of My Experiences, there was no fear. Mm-hmm. There is no fear. Mm-hmm. And no one should feel afraid. You know, I'm not going to say that the process of getting there is pleasant.
Yeah.
But death, there's no fear.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I had a meditation practice many years ago, not too long after my mother had passed. And we met on the bench in this meditation. And we had a conversation about her life beyond. And she was talking about how peaceful it was. How absolutely peaceful.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there was just so much contentment and joy and just peacefulness that was emanating from that, and how nourishing that was.
And the quote that I like came from Ram Dass, who did a lot with people who were dying and such. And how he described the actual process is, it's like taking off a tight shoe. And then once you're out of the tight shoe, you're free.
And so, Lei, how is it that people can experience that here while still alive, living on Earth? How can we heal that trauma so that we can also feel joy and contentment and peace? Is there a way for that? Is there a path to that here while we're still living?
There absolutely is. And while it sounds really like simplistic, it is not necessarily easy. It's, you know, everything that came to each of us in our traumas, and we all have traumas, came to us either through or in fear and caused fear in us. The way to get through the traumas is to face that fear. And that can be extremely frightening. That doesn't mean you have to do it alone. There are people like me who will help others, you know, especially as as a person is looking for, how do I even find this thing? I just know that it's really, it feels terrible. It's keeping me from doing what I'm supposed to do.
Mm.
And that's when you probably need someone who will guide you, ask a lot of questions without judgment, so that you can find your own way through it. That's how I help people. And that I did it on my own. As I say in the book, and I explain in the book, it is not something that really should be dealt with alone if you can find a way of doing it elsewise. It was very difficult. It was very painful. It was emotional upheaval more times than I can count. And it's just a lot easier to have somebody support you. For instance, children who are raised in an unsupportive environment, they may grow up, but they're going to grow up a very hard way, and there's a very strong chance that adulthood is going to be very difficult for them. Children who grow up with support are much more likely to move into adulthood and through adulthood in life in more ease and grace. And that is the way that I would suggest people do it. Sure, you can try it on your own. I don't suggest it. But you can, anyone, everyone has fears. And we have been so indoctrinated into having fears that I think all of us have fears that we can face on our own. And basically, it's kind of like you did with your trauma, with your, you go into meditation, you go into whatever method works for you, and you look deep and you ask questions. What is this? Where did it come from? Why do I have it? Do I still need it? Can I let this go now? But the thing about traumas is any emotion, before you let it go, because you can't just let it go, it's not dealt with. You have to feel it fully. And then you can, once you've felt it fully, you can figure out, am I ready to let this go? For most of us, maybe all of us, life is a spiral. You dealt with this. Okay, good. I feel good. It'll come back around. Why is this still here? I thought I let go of that. Okay, deal with it again. But you're one step higher now. Okay, now you do it again, and okay, around the circle again. Oh, we're back here again. I got to do it again. But you're working your way up the spiral, so that eventually, in the words of Ram Dass, it can go from being a neuroses to being a little shmoo, where you can say, "Oh, hi, there you are again. Would you like to have a little cup of tea?"
I love that. And there's so many acronyms for fear, and one that I really like is face everything and rise. And it's like you're saying, you face it, you look at it, you see it for what it is, you feel it, everything, and then you rise. And then it comes around again and you rise. You face everything and you rise. And you keep rising. That's how we elevate, our heart, our mind, our body, our souls. And so also, like you said, it's really beautiful, sacred to have a witness on this journey to help you along, to help you see things that have become so obscure that you may not see clearly right now, that can help you feel safe as you're going through this. And so, how can people reach out to you, Lei? How can they get a hold of you? Where would they find you?
Well, there's several ways. The first one is my website, which is handletheshift.com. Handletheshift.com. And I'm on Facebook under my name, and one can get a hold of me that way. You can also email me. That's on the website also, but it's lei@handletheshift.com. And those are the easiest and most effective ways of getting a hold of me. And if I can help anyone, that's why I'm here. So please, if I can help you, let me know.
Thank you so much, Lei. It's been such a pleasure and an honor having you here. And I wonder if there is anything else that you would like to share.
I would like to share that all of us are part of the same whole. We are all part of oneness, and we all share all of our experiences in the collective and our thoughts and our feelings. And you're never alone. I know that some of us feel like we are always alone, but none of us is ever alone. And that this whole experience, we're here to experience. It's not, when we get to that time when we're on our deathbed, we're not going to think about, oh gosh, did I sweep the floor? Oh, I forgot to do the laundry. What we're going to look at is the times that someone was very loving to us, and the times that we were very loving to others. And so what really matters in life, what we put into the collective the most, is the joy, the love that we all share.
I love that. I love that. And while not all of us, or not even many of us, have had a shared death experience, we can have shared life experiences.
And we should.
Yes, and we should. So wonderful. So wonderful having you here, Lei, and so wonderful having each and every one of you that have been tuning in to Awaken and Ascend. We do hope to see you again next time. And if this spoke to your soul, then give us a like and reach out to Lei. I'm going to have all her links in the show notes here so that you can just click into that. And I do hope to see you again next time. Thank you again, Lei.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.